Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 615. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, Dr. Norge. I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, the Duke of the Sultan of Strategery, the indestructible bridge-defying, wonders if Sean's questions about his hat size means that he's wondering if he can continue the podcast with just a living brain. So says the elder statesman of the podcast, Segulin.
How's it going, eh?
Jim, on this episode, we're going to be talking about the excellent Batman 115. We're also going to talk loosely about Catwoman 36, I Am Batman number 2, and Nightwing number 85. We're also weaving in casually some of the other tie-ins, but not going really spoilery on those. So this is a Batman Fear State catch-up episode, and I'm so excited to talk about this big event. We are sponsored, as always, by DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Jim, what is going on over at DCBService.com?
Well, two of my favorite words are 50% off and hardcover. So we've got the Static Season 1 hardcover, 50% off, only $14.99. And we have the hardcover of the series Represent. I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but it was an absolutely awesome story that played out. And again, 50% off a hardcover, only $12.49. So thank you, DCBS.
Yeah, Represent was really great. I'm glad you're shouting that one out. Over at InStockTrades.com, I always look at the new releases because that's some chance for me to check and see what kind of things have I missed. And on the DC side, Batman The Last Night on Earth is out as a trade paperback, and it's under the DC Black Label banner. And this was Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. It's a great series. It's $24.99 regularly, 42% off, only $14.49. And if you missed this series, this is a great way to pick it up. So I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support our show. Mr. Segulin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on today's show. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk Fear State.
Nice work, Atom. What are these characters up to?
Our first discussion this episode is going to be about Batman 115. James Tynion IV is the writer. Bengal and Jorge Jimenez are artists. Tomeu Morey on colors. Clayton Cowles on letters. Jimenez and Morey on the cover. Ariste Dane and Jorge Molina on the variant covers. Dave Wheel goes associate editor. Ben Abernathy's the editor. Batman created by Bob Kane with Bill Finger. And apologies for any name butchery, because this has been a story. I mean, I love Batman epics, and this has been one. I think I've been terrified. It's appropriately named Fear State. I've been terrified of this story because of where Future State goes. What I've loved about this story is how much it's dipped towards Future State, while at the same time showing us that Future State's not set in stone. This could wind up being better or worse. Yeah. And it really does feel like that intensity of, like, where is this going to go? What is going to happen with my favorite characters? It's something that I've really come to appreciate about the delivery of this story. It just feels like a big event. I got caught up over this weekend and all of the tie-ins and everything like associated with this, and it really does give you a scope and scale of how big this event is. Where we're at this point, Jim, with Fear State, how are you feeling about this as an overall event? Is this something you're digging?
Oh, dude, I'm absolutely loving this. I'm beyond digging, and like you, it's because we had that glimpse on Future State and we saw how horrible things could go. The whole time I'm reading this, I'm looking for, one, comparisons to what Future State was, but also areas where things probably maybe shifted this time. Like with this one, with this current timeline, it looks to me like Saint didn't do the double cross quick enough on Scarecrow. So Scarecrow didn't get taken out of the picture early on in the game like he did in Future State. So Saint doesn't have as much power as he had with Future State. And plus, the Bat looks like he embraced more of his team and his family this version than he did in the previous Future State. In the Future State. So I think we're going to have, again, they're handling things differently this time around, and I want to say it's going better for the heroes, but better is in air quotes because everything is still messed up, and you have no idea what's going to happen with Gotham. And that is a really neat statement going on, that we have no idea what's going on. And even all the other titles that were affected by Future State, you see, they're having different variations than how horrible Future State was. There's possibilities of things being better off. So it's kind of a neat. I'm so excited for this because we got such a horrific glimpse of what the future held. We're now seeing things aren't as bad, maybe, kind of, possibly.
I'd love to know your definition of not as bad. Because here's the funny part. There was a double cross, but it was the Scarecrow doing the double cross this time first, which is where everything, because all along the Scarecrow's had this plan, and he double crossed Saint, which is the reversal that you're talking about. But here's what I love. This Miracle Molly machine that we're talking about in this issue has the potential to use fear to, wipe the minds of everybody and load them up with fear.
Yes.
And not only that, Saint right now, with what he's doing, could potentially implode the entire city because of what Ivy's got going below ground. So I'm laughing at your definition of better.
I did say air quotes around better.
Because on paper, this is far more destructive. It is interesting to look at them because there is a scope and scale of bad in both scenarios. And that's what I'm loving about this. We're seeing echoes of what happened in Future State. It's a very interesting world that we're looking at. The writing is phenomenal and top-notch. And I know that we're going to be getting a new writer on Batman, I think shortly after the end of this. And I'm going to be sad to see him go because this has been just a really terrific story. I'm very excited for what we've got coming next, don't get me wrong. But I think it's any time you've got great writers that have been on the series who've taken these stories and really just pushed the intensity, when it's bittersweet, when you're excited for what's coming next, but at the same time, you've been really digging where this has been going. The scope and scale of this is epic. I'm going to say this. I hate Simon Saint. Talk about a well-crafted villain that between Future State and this really have done a really good job at making this villain feel like he has been around, or as at least as impactful as the baddest of the bad of Batman's villains in a very, very short period of time. This has been a very well-crafted, well-developed villain that I think is going to be a part of I hope is going to be part of the Batman mythos moving forward. We've added some new tools to the sandbox.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing with me. I agree with you. I absolutely hate him, and he's just a vile character, but he's that smarmy, Weasley vile character. So he has got a different level of evil to him. And I think that makes him that is one of the things that really make me like him as a character, hate him as a person. Because you look at some of the Bat rogues, a lot of them have just that over the top, persona. Saint has got that little smarmy Weasley little guy. If he didn't have all this money and the tech and all that stuff that he had going for him, he'd be a nothing. Whereas you could take the Joker and drop him, 100% poor in the worst situation with absolutely nothing but a pocket knife, and he could still cause terror and horror. Same thing on with Scarecrow or any of the other big name villains of the Bat family. They don't need their extra little gimmicks to be dangerous. Saint needs the gimmicks, and I like that about this character because what you said is you want to see him around, but you do wonder how is that going to happen. unless he's able to make escape and, lick his wounds and come back later, he's one of those villains that I'm very curious to see how they're going to continue keeping him around, because if he doesn't have his resources, he's got nothing. I think that makes it kind of neat, because you really do see the desperation that he's going through with a lot of this stuff, because it's, he's just a fraction away from losing everything. And I think that, again, the desperation and just that level of, how much I hate this guy really make for some awesome reading.
One of the things that, I think you mentioned Smarmy before, and that he's different evil. He reminds me a bit of Dr. Savannah. And you get it with, like, even the whole situation. I'm not saying he's a cookie cutter of that character. Don't get me wrong. So I'm not saying that. But there's things about that character that he just feels icky, if that makes sense, when he's really well written. And it's almost like it's a combination of Dr. Savannah and a little bit of Mr. Mind and just, like, a lot of your creepier characters. But Ricardo, like, there's the explosion. He's not, like, super concerned right at that moment about, like, all the devastation and everything out of this. It's like, yeah, we got to get that body. The brain. If the brain's still intact, I mean, like, we get, like, the stranger things in the world than a living brain, right? So, and that's all about optics, right? He's not really concerned about, he's concerned about recovering the technology and knowing what he was able to do with Ricardo. But he's, like, thinking to himself, well, if we can recover the brain, the living brain thing, like, people will accept that, right? So he can still keep moving forward with his plan. None of that is actual concern for Ricardo. It's, he recognizes Ricardo as a useful tool. He knows that, like, there is, like, that is the dedication that he was able to build, like, his peacekeepers around. I love the way that was put together. It was super cool.
It's funny because, again, with that whole Ricardo thing, I'm sitting there, I'm nodding my head as you're going on, but also I'm thinking back to even the previous issue where he was so focused on, we got to get Peacekeeper back, we got to get people back. Forget about him, kill him, Just that he was able just to flip the switch on Peacekeeper 1, where he was so determined, we got to get him back, no, kill him, don't kill him, we got to bring him back. And then he reaches that point where he's like, forget it, just write off that asset, and take him down. And it shows just that level of just, again, I keep saying smarmy, evil, just, you want to punch him in the face kind of a personality that this guy has. And I think it's, again, I always say whenever you get a true emotional response from a comic book character, whether it's you love him or you hate him, that just shows really good quality writing.
And that's exactly it, because of the fact that these are characters that clearly to Simon Saint, they don't matter. You said it before, asset. Peacekeeper 1 was an asset. And he recognized the fact that if you have to start over from scratch, was going to require finding somebody that you can craft the story around, like he did with Peacekeeper 1, right? And it's funny, when you read the Peacekeeper 1 special, you see, did you get the chance to read that one?
Yeah.
So you read that and you see the background, and it's like, they made a hero out of a really bad guy who's got an unfortunate and tragic story, and you see, because of his family background and everything, how he got there. So you're sympathetic to him, but it doesn't change the fact that he's really not at all a nice guy. And I love the way that this is played out, where you're like, oh my gosh, he's just awful. Just continual, just plain awful. And this guy's just enabled this guy to have a position of prominence. And I love that. I love that I feel that about this character and the way that this is all rolled out. It's been such a great and surprising story because of how it's ended up playing out with that. Them as assets. And I was nodding when you were saying that. I'm like, what a great way to put it. You jump on from Simon Saint to Ivy. And the Ivy story's been terrific because it's not only played out here, but really has been playing out heavily in both Harley's book and Catwoman's book with different aspects of Ivy. Like, what's really going, as I think as a reader, we were trying to figure out what's really going on with Ivy. And when you realize that her personality's been split off and there's elements of her that almost like a plant, like one of her branches is with Catwoman and another branch is currently with Harley. It's been such a great big story, and that story really needed to unfold in those books because of the way that this main story proper has been cooking here. This crossover has been a great example of what I prefer to see in these events when they're happening. I do like the ones sometimes where they can chronologically go, issue 1 is in Batman, issue 2 is in Detective, issue 3 is in Nightwing, for example, where those stories work. But when you can flesh out the story and give you a sense of Gotham and its various little these suburbs now that are like offshoots of Gotham that we've seen Nightwing and Catwoman inhabit, you do get a sense of scope and scale. And then you add in these one-shots that have been really outstanding, like the Signal one, for example, Miracle Molly. I mean, these have been like great one-shots and urban legends where we've got like Batwoman stories unfolding with this. And things starting to go on with the Batgirls in the back of this. It feels big. This story feels big on a level that I haven't read in a while. It reminds me of events like Cataclysm and stuff like that when they were unfolding and leading into No Man's Land and just this sense of something big. And I really appreciate, we've talked about all of our fears about the changing landscape of comics and stuff like that. And my big fear was that we would eventually get away from big stories. And I'm so glad that we haven't, because these are important. We talked for years about like event-itis, right? And how that sometimes becomes a thing. It's more, I'm more protective of like this type of event, this type of story now, probably more than ever before when I realize if these were gone and we didn't have this, and yes, we got really cool monthly stories, but that was all we got. And I'm not diminishing those. Don't get me wrong. Like short form one-shots or, 5-parters or things like that are great stories. And I love those. And it's the incredibly talented writers deliver those. But, and they're a big part of my reading experience. I really enjoy those. But I don't want to sacrifice these larger scale things either. I want it all. And my big fear when everything was going on with editorial and stuff like that is, first of all, as I've said before, I really do care about everybody landing with work and the talent that have entertained us winding up somewhere successful and productive and being able to follow them in those places. And then you get back to the company proper and the characters that you're enjoying. I don't want to give up stuff like this because this is what leads to movies, right? This is what leads to these, like the direct-to-DVD releases. This is what leads to adaptations. And I don't want the only source for them to be able to pull from is past great work. I want them to pull from past great work. But I want continued new contemporary stories that are going to be a part of the mix too. I think the more that you're adding to the mythos, the more that we're going to get content-wise in other medium as well. So I'm glad that this stuff is happening because this has got to at some point in time appear in some media, right?
Oh God, yeah. Fear State story, Fear State, Future State, all of this could really 100% go into movie, animated, live action. I don't know, however you want to play this out. This 100% could play out to an amazing story. Because again, you think about how many events we've had in the Bat family. Starting all the way back from The Wedding, City of Bane, Joker War, now Fear State. We keep going from these big events to a big event to a big event, and it's kind of a neat, we're getting some great stories out of the Bat family. And I'm like, this for me has been just absolutely wonderful. And I really do like this storytelling style a lot. Because as you said before, it gives you this overall perspective of all of Gotham. It's not just going from part 1 to part 2 to part 3, because I used to always, that used to be my preferred way of doing it, because I need structure. I need, this, tell me what to read next. I'm going to read that next. That used to be my mindset. But, it's been, past, couple years or so, I like this more free-flowing, open world source because it does feel monumental. It feels epic, and it's crossing over multiple books. But it's not one of those things where if I don't read it in the right order, I'm lost. I'm not. I'm picking up different things. Now I'm seeing this part. I'm seeing Queen Ivy over here, and I'm seeing Pammy Ivy over here. Okay, now here's the Seer up here in the Nightwing Oracle stories. Okay, down here we got Miracle Molly with the bat. We got Ghost Walker. We've got all the Batgirls. We've got all these different pieces playing out in their various books and whatnot. So it's a really cool story. And again, it's one of those things where I got a hats off to editorial, creative, whoever is the person that's juggling and balancing and keeping everything in line with each other. Outstanding work, because there's how many titles within this Fear State story arc, and they're all doing you're not thrown off if you read one title. You're like, wait, that's off kilter. No, everything is online and on par with each other. It's absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've become a lot more, I don't want to say comfortable with, or a lot more excited about in comics is that the story should drive what the format looks like. So if it's a great done-in-one story, it should be done as a done-in-one story. Cool. I like one-shots. That's cool. If it's a 5-parter, it's a 5-parter. If it's an epic event, how it's formatted should be driven by the needs of the story. And if there's opportunities to give us larger, bigger pictures of it through one-shots and specials and things like that are attached to it, great. If that doesn't fit the particular story and it's better to go like in some kind of chronological order through multiple books, that's cool too. This kind of stuff is great. I like that, like, there's certain characters in this that you don't necessarily need a one-shot about, like Master Wise. Let's use him as an example, right? So we find out his backstory in this issue and his link with the Mad Hatter and Dormouse. And boy, who knew the Mad Hatter was going to be like the background MVP of this story? Because he seems to keep popping up all over the place as being a catalyst of all kinds of characters in this one. From Peacekeeper 1 to Master Wise, who was Dormouse. And I mean, here's the thing. I would also eventually want to change my name if my old MO was Dormouse. But I love how he references that too, where he's like, it's kind of nice having that name because I was kind of under the radar, and made a ton of sense. So she remembered who he was, but like it wasn't this like prominent, like supporting, henchman from Mad Hatter. So that part was really great. I liked the background of Master Wise. I would love to see a flowchart of how this whole doggone thing was put together, because there's so many characters that, and you're completely nailing that one as far as the editorial that's working on this, the writers that are working on this really have done such a terrific job of crafting this big story where coming out of this is a lot of content that can be, this Unsanity Collective, whether they remain a group or not after all this remains to be seen. But there's a lot of opportunities for them to spin off the same way like characters from We Are Robin now are taking on different roles, right? Remember, all the Robins from that group from years ago, some of them are still good, some of them are bad, some of them have kind of gone back to a normal life. And it's interesting to see characters from the past of comics continue to pop up again. This used to be a big thing in X-Men books, right? Because there were so many X-Men characters that sometimes you would do these snapshots back into them. And I love that the Gotham world with the fact that we've got all these little boroughs and things now. You get to and the sewer system and the underground that it has manifested into these really, really cool things that just feel great.
We always say Gotham is a character, and it has to be a character for a true great Batman story. Again, through this Batman event, the fact that Gotham is such a major character, with each character, each of the different players having a different section of Gotham. And because what section they're in is how their story is playing out differently. And that's something that I really love about this. With, you've got, over in the Catwoman story where she's at, you have this, where this is taking place. It's all the different little mixtures of how vast and massive of a city Gotham actually is. Yeah. It's kind of neat to get a pretty good glimpse of it here.
This Scarecrow and Peacekeeper 1 sequence is really, really exciting, especially if you've read the one-shot, The Secret Files And I honestly read the Secret Files after this, but then reread the issue. And boy, when you have his whole backstory, it really adds to this moment where you can see how the Scarecrow's able to manipulate him. Because he was already a mess. And we kind of knew that, but boy, does that Secret Files like really explain that he never had a chance. I mean, his world really has put him in this place. And you can't, it's funny where you feel bad for a character that I don't like him either, but you can feel bad for him, if that makes sense. He's not somebody I'm ever going to like, but you go, boy, he's an example of upbringing, just poor upbringing, and never really having the opportunity to get past the mistakes of his parents and grandparents and this kind of legacy of the way that we understand the way Gotham runs, and trying to keep that going and not allowing change, not being an agent of change. He's now in a position where he can be an agent of change, but not necessarily in the way that would be productive.
Not in a good way. Yeah, and again, it does show Scarecrow's intelligence. And I think that's something that this whole Fear State story has really showed us, how dangerous the Scarecrow is. He's not just the guy who sprays fear gas and has you see, things you're afraid of. There's so much more to him. The level of strategery that the Scarecrow has is something that is really awesome, and they're really playing a great job with this. And it's kind of neat. I like how Peacekeeper 1 says, "You're a villain. I can't help you. No, I'm a doctor, and I have the cure. You're the cure." And just, again, I love just how he kept playing he kept playing him so well, partially because he's literally in his mind, but partially because he is so intelligent. This is an actual trained doctor, and he wasn't just some slouch at it. He knew what he was doing. Himself touched in the head and a little bit off kilter there, but it's one of those things where you're like, man, this is a great villain. I remember as a kid, I used to think, okay, not a big deal on this guy. You just wear a gas filter and you're fine. No, he doesn't need the gas. He can take you down so many other ways. He can take down the city so many different ways. And I think that is something that we're really seeing in this story.
Well, he's somebody who feels that the curing the illness, the ends, the research, what you learn justify the means.
Yeah.
So it's okay to experiment on others if in the long run the learning comes along with it, right? So there is no price that's not worth paying if you're going to learn from it and be able to take advantage of it. It's an interesting philosophy because you look at it and you're like, boy, doesn't that pop up a lot? It's an interesting sort of dynamic because there's an illness to him. And I think when you craft stories like this that really define the Scarecrow, it keeps him from being just this. He's evolved over the years into this much more psychological character, which it's kind of funny to say that like we didn't think that before. But I think it got beyond the gas, to your point. And there's so much more to who Jonathan Crane is and what brought him to that dance that writers over the years have added parts to him, that we've got this fully realized character now, that Fear State's just, again, advancing our understanding on who Jonathan Crane is and why he really is one of the scarier villains in the Batman universe. And I really don't mean that as a pun, because there is something to it. And you see how he's manipulating Peacekeeper 1 in a way that's just woof.
Well, he's been manipulating everybody from the jump. And I think that is one of the neat things when you go back and reread the stories and you start rereading this. I can't wait for this to come out in the absolute, because it's going to be an absolute. And I want to go back and reread this thing, and I want the whole. Give me everything in this just massive tome. That's what I'm hoping for. But going back and rereading these stories and just seeing how he played from the very beginning, how everybody, it's awesome to see. And I'm like, man, he is the true villain in the story. And Saint's a piece of garbage, but to me, the true villain in Fear State is, of course, the Scarecrow. And I think that's wonderful because in reality, when the story first started off, everything was pointing to Saint. Everything's pointing as Saint being the villain. Saint double-crossed. The Scarecrow took him out early on. That's not how it happened this time. That was Future State. Now we're seeing what happens if the Scarecrow gets the jump on Saint, how much worse it gets.
Yeah, and it was... Scarecrow would make the argument that this was my plan all along. I was going to use Saint as much as I needed to in order to forward my research. Once I did that, he no longer was useful to me. Because the research... Actually, it's funny, they have some similarities when you think about it. Like Saint, sacrificial. I don't need him anymore. I need to move forward with that. And Saint's plans actually contradict and get in the way of mine. And that's really an issue there that they veer off, because Saint would be an anchor at this point to what Scarecrow's trying to do. Because Saint would not agree with everything that he has planned, because optics-wise, people might be a little upset about this.
A little bit. Just a slight bit.
Batman and Miracle Molly. Boy, Miracle Molly's a character that I didn't really care about early on in the story. Because I'm like, oh, the Insanity Collective, okay, I get the idea behind them. Boy, as this story's been fleshed out, have I changed and really like this character a lot. The one shot that she had was really helpful in advancing that. But, like, her interactions with Batman here are great. It's like, I was wondering what it'd be like, to see you in the middle of a big citywide crisis. I didn't expect you to be so calm. Aren't you scared? And I love those honest moments with Batman. Of course I am. I'm not just scared. I'm angry. I'm angry for all the people of Gotham. And he's going on and on about all the reasons why he's angry, but it's given us kind of this nice little overview of the Bat family and our new Batman, Jace, and things like that are going on within Gotham. I thought it was really, really great to see this overview, because he's like, right now we're in this weird... we're used to being connected. And think about it. Our favorite stories have involved, like, Oracle connecting people, and the resolution of the story comes from the Bat family getting on the same page, the team being rallied together, and everyone being... And we're getting that. We're getting this Bat family that's all working towards the same cause, but they are not interconnected. This is one of the first times I remember a story in a long time where the Bat family is trying to achieve the same goal, but that goal that they're trying to achieve is not one they're going to get through communication. Batman being able to count on the fact that, okay, I've got Team Nightwing over here doing this, Red Robin's over here doing this, it's the Batgirls are doing that, and that lack of communication is actually putting a lot of them in severe danger, as we've seen in issues that are converging now, where I'm very worried about the two women I'm looking at right now on this page. And that's something that's spinning out of this. I'm hoping that everyone's going to be okay. There's a sense of danger to this story that is very, very different because of Future State, but also because of the differences in this from Future State. All bets are off.
Oh, big time. And again, it's funny with me and the Batgirls, I know they'll be fine. And I know what issue you're talking about where things don't look too good for them. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I don't think they're going to kill them off. But it is the question of how do they get out? What is the aftermath after they get out? That is some of the stuff where we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know, in the end, I'm comfortable and I'm confident that the good guys are going to win. And I did air quotes around the word win because there are different levels of winning in the universe, especially in the Bat universe. But it's the variation that Gray comes in. What level of win are we talking about? Are we going to see a Gotham that has been devastated, that has been destroyed, has been... Where are they going to be? And I think that is the mystery of the story, is always one of the things that keeps you going. Especially in these big events like this, you're pretty confident that someone named Batman is going to survive. And I don't think Nightwing or Oracle have are going to die, or any of them. I don't think, but you never know what's going to happen to them. You think back to Killing Joke. Barbara Gordon didn't die, but she was paralyzed. And then they turned that and she became Oracle. And how much great stuff did she do as Oracle? Who knows what's going to happen to the Batgirls? Are they going to be 100% out of this? Or are they going to have to, improvise, modify? There's so many different things that are going to happen out of this story. And we don't know where that's going to go. And I think that for me is one of my excitements on this story, because there's so many things that can happen. And where this story is going to go. And I don't know, and I want to see it. And Miracle Molly is one of those characters, however, who does have a bullseye on her. She's a great character, and they introduced her for this series. So anybody who's introduced for this series may not make it out. I hope she makes it out. I hope she's not a casualty on this, because, again, as you said, she's a great character, and I want to see more out of her.
It's funny what you said about the Batgirls. Actually, I don't disagree with you. I think they're safe, but I thought Alfred was too.
Yeah, true.
So I mean, so at what point in time do you sit there and go, what characters are and aren't safe? Because characters have died in comics before. I mean, and there's been storytelling reasons for that. And it's not even just death, though. Like, okay, Oracle is Oracle because of Killing Joke. And when you think about what they did to Batgirl in Killing Joke, yeah, I read that in real time, and I'm like, did they just do that? And then you're thinking to yourself, okay, this is a one-shot, right? Is this Elseworlds? And it wasn't. They actually brought that into continuity. I don't know that it was intended when Killing Joke was originally written that it was going to go where it did, but its popularity certainly influenced it then becoming a part of Oracle's, or Batgirl's storytelling moving forward, and led to the birth of Oracle, which to this day, there's fights over, is she Barbara, is she Batgirl, is she Oracle? And I mean, talk about an evolution for a character. So I'm 100% nodding with everything you're saying. And none of this is a contradiction of you. I'm just more playing out my thought process of, I don't know what I believe as far as what they would do to evolve characters at this point. So that's the part where I'm wondering, is there a danger here that maybe we aren't aware of? Whether there is or there isn't. You know what I mean? Where like the end result might be everyone's going to be just fine at the end of this. When the story's going on, there should be that feeling of that suspension of disbelief where you're like, some of my friends here are in danger. Like people and likely people that I don't think. We saw in Future State that it changed the status quo for Bruce, for example, in Future State. I don't want that for him. So that's, to me, a sense of danger, of urgency, of I don't want this to end up with Bruce being the state that he was in Future State. So I don't know that that's off the table in this story. And I'm not going to be comfortable till it is.
And I'll be honest with you, it's funny. I agree with what I'm nodding my head along with you, because we really don't know Bruce's what's going to happen to him. Because before I said, it's obvious the Bat's going to win. Well, guess what? There's now 2 Bats in the system.
Right.
And what if they take Bruce off the table completely? What if Bruce is gone at the end of this story is done? Jace is the only Batman left. And we no longer have Bruce Wayne as Batman or even around. To your point with Alfred, everybody's expendable. They could get rid of Bruce Wayne as Batman in this story very easily. And again, that'd be like, I'd be shocked. I'd be like, what? Huh? That would completely throw me for a loop, especially if they don't really announce it. If they just, you're reading it, you pick up an issue, you're reading, and Bruce Wayne's dead. What? How awesome and how horrific would that be? It'd be one of those kind of moments. But I'll tell you, it could happen very easily in this story. They're really laying out a cool, sense of danger for every single character here.
Yeah, and that's something where the story should have that, and I think Future State set this up really well by giving you that sense of that. The Mind Machine thing, like building to that, I didn't see that layer coming. And I loved seeing that because she announced last issue that I know what's going on. I think I know where the Scarecrow's going. and I have to get to Batman. Batman has to know about this because he's not aware of what's really going on here. And that was something that I really was drawn to in this, was this idea of, wow, we got this event that's happening, and this could really wind up being something that what the Joker did. And think about how big that story is, because this is all still resonating from the Joker's last big event in the Bat universe, is still having resonating impacts on this. What is this going to do afterwards? Where is this story going to stand as far as the next run, right? What is the Gotham going to look like after this?
Oh, God, yeah. And I'll tell you, it's funny because we're at the Breaker page where Bat's fighting fighting Molly's friend, and this page really just kind of really resonates how well these two work together, Bat and Molly. And again, I'd like to see her part of full-fledged member of the Bat family, because one, she's got the technical stuff, but two, she does have some physical skills, and she could be, for all practice, a Robin. I wouldn't call her a Robin. She's Miracle Molly. She has her own name, but she could really work well with Bruce. And that's something that I'm like, man, this is kind of neat. Again, this is a really cool character.
Well, and like a lot of the supporting cast in the Bat books, right? You see them at times, you can see how these two would collaborate, and it would be a really strong collaboration. And other times, they have severe philosophical differences between the two of them. In this case, out of convenience, they have to be on the same page, and they want to stop this. When this is all over and done, though, are they going to be? And they could be. This could build a beautiful relationship, but would the whole Unsanity Collective agree with her? It's going to be an interesting sort of relationship afterwards. This whole fight with Breaker was really great because you see her step up, like where she knows, like, if I don't disassemble this, if I don't stop this, he's going to pulverize me. Really, because he's still, even with them disassembled, he's a 400-pound guy who can fight. She's trying to give Batman a fighting chance, because unless Batman can take him down, she's done. Yeah. No matter what, the gauntlets coming down are only to give Batman an edge, so that way he can take this guy down. And I loved that, 1-2 punch of her, it wasn't clean, too. She made a mistake, but then that mistake was something where she was like, okay, I think I've got it. But, one of her picks before that, had an issue. And I'm sitting here like, wow, that is so realistic. It gave you this sense of intensity. I loved the writing on that. That this, because of the fact that he's in motion, it's not something where she's playing with this tech or trying to pick at this tech that is not in motion, and she's got to latch on and do this on the fly. I loved that sense of urgency. Really, really well written sequence.
Improvise, adapt, and overcome, and just the beauty of chaos, in this sequence, because it's not just a cool story, which it is. Just the art flow and just everything that's going through there, it really does show the artistry of, just of this combat, of this sequencing, of this motion. And it's, this is one of those couple pages where it could very easily get overlooked. But in reality, this is absolutely beautiful creation of the story and art working together.
Right. And that's totally the case. The idea of this machine to save Gotham, and you actually see the scarecrows, you're a remarkable young man, Sean. You carried so much fear within you. Now we'll see what happens when we channel so much more pain and horror through your mind. He's basically telling him, dude, I am going to, jack you up on fear. Why would you do that? Dude, I'm not going to put on this hat and have you do that to me. Wow. I just love the manipulation that, and Sean's all in. He's like, I'm in my head.
Yeah.
It's
I'm in.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, and again, it shows just Scarecrow how wonderful he is at what he does. Let's steal from Wolvie. He's the best at what he does, right there. He is the master of fear. And I think that is something that is just absolutely beautiful. Again, I 100% love that.
The Ivy sequence where you get this idea, because there's multiple things going on right now, and this is where it feels really big, because we're ending off this issue with that. Scarecrow seems to be succeeding. But besides that, Ivy's come to realize that she's being attacked now, and the magistrates are coming into her world. He's ready to... Simon's lost it. Like, he's ready to implode Gotham if he has to achieve his goals. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here to Gotham. Because they actually reference No Man's Land and say that what could actually happen here could be worse than No Man's Land. And that blew me away. Like, what a sequence there.
Dude, I think that's I think that's Saint's plan all along.
Yeah.
He wants Ivy to destroy all of Gotham. He wants, and it says there next, scorched earth, scorched mind. He wants scorched earth. He wants Gotham completely leveled. That's why he's sending the magistrate into Ivy. He wants her to bring everything down on the city. He's safe above it. He's in the little sky cart, so he's fine. He wants everything else leveled. And I think it's one of those things where, again, we're dealing with a villain who, it's like, I'm going to take my ball and go home now. He's lost. He's lost control. So he's like, I can't have it. No one else can. And he's going to level the city, and he'll blame it all on Ivy, saying, hey, it's these crazy villains. It's not me. It's them, And he's going to put his little spin on it because, again, no one alive will know that he sent the forces in after Ivy or that he intentionally, did this to get her to destroy the city. I think that's where he's going with this. I think 100% it's not about killing Ivy. It's about triggering Ivy to destroy the city.
This whole Batgirl's backup story is great. If there's a book I'd love to see spin out of this, it's Batgirl's. And I do this with Urban Legends a lot as well, where there's stories that are going on that I'm like, I'd like that to be a series. But Batgirl's, because it feels like a new Birds of Prey, if that makes any sense. I would love to see this continue on either as a co-feature like it is in this, or continue on as its own book. Because I love these characters. I love the idea of Oracle having a team. I think these two have a great dynamic, and their differences, Spoiler and Cassandra, have such really cool differences between the two of them. I love that they've embraced the fact that these two were both Batgirl at one point in time. And I like that Cassandra's Batgirl again. I've always loved her as Batgirl. I love the orphan character, don't get me wrong. I didn't think that was a bad route either, but I like that in this evolution we're like, nah, she's got a team of Batgirls now. And they're going out there and embracing the fact that they earned those stripes. I've always loved Spoiler's Batgirl outfit, and I'm glad that the new outfit is kind of a hybrid of her Spoiler suit and that Batgirl suit, because that Batgirl suit was really cool at the time. I really enjoyed the series with Stephanie as a lead, and this embracing all of that was something that was really cool, because Cassandra gets into this fight, Stephanie's trying to help her, and the sheer numbers that she's facing down is staggering. And she's also got a target on her because of the fact that, because of Seer, Cassandra's been kind of framed as murdering somebody. And that wasn't really the case, but the Seer character, we keep talking about Simon Saint and what's going on with Scarecrow. Let's not forget Seer, who is a character that spun out of this that, wow, I want to see this character in the future as well. Boy, has this been a year of adding couple years of adding some great characters into the DC mythology in general, right? Especially on the villains end, just modernizing some of the villains. I think they add to and increase the value of some of our other characters, because seeing the Penguins and the Riddler's reaction to the lay of the land and what's going on wouldn't be as interesting if they didn't have this to play off of. And it's evolved those characters and made them interesting too. It's been a wonderful dynamic in all of this.
Well, it's funny. You talk about diversity in comics and how we need a comic base that looks and feels like the real world. And that's something that all the companies are now doing. They're really making an effort. But part of it isn't just diversity in race, gender, orientation, and whatnot. It's about the type of character, the type of villain, the type of hero that we have out there. And that's something that we're really, again, so far in this episode, we've talked about a couple new characters that have come into the play, and each one has their own little dynamic difference. Some similarity, we can pull some similarities of other characters, but in reality, they are unique hero/villains. And I think that is something that makes comics that much more enjoyable. It's we've seen longtime character Scarecrow really get a really cool working here. We see these new villains with Saint and Seer doing some really neat stuff. We've got some great heroes, in Molly and in the Batgirls, where they're really letting them shine and step up to the light. This is stuff that really brings comics on forward. And not even just on forward in that it's all inclusive. It's on forward into, guys like me who I've had, my, genre, my gender, my everything has always been 100% represented in comics. When I pick up a book, I see people who look like me, who sound like me, who act like me. I don't, that I'm set. And when I read and I see all this other diversity, all these other characters, that for me also enjoys my experience. And it because you don't just keep getting the same thing. We need differences. We need something new. We need something improved. We still need to hold on to our classics. We still need, I still need my Superman, but I'm getting a Superman, coming up that it's not going to be Clark Kent. It's going to be his son. And I'm cool with that because they're telling some great stories. Who knows with the Bat? We may not have Bruce Wayne. Again, I'll miss Bruce, but, so for all the stories we've read about Jace, those some really cool stories. He's a great Batman. I want to read more of him. So I love the fact that the comic companies are now taking the moment and they're actually doing this with these other characters, with these new villains, with these new heroes. It's something for all of us to enjoy.
See, I see a world, and I'm not actually disagreeing with anything you're saying. I'm actually far more excited to see a world where Jace and Bruce coexist. So let's talk a little bit about I Am Batman, right? Because we're up to issue number 2. So, and we'll put this in the spoiler warning. But in issue number 2 of I Am Batman, we get to see Jace combating all this too, but also the fact that Jace is called out on some of Bruce's MO, where it's like, well, Batman doesn't kill, so I'm not worried about you. And Jace pulls off that covering and shows that I'm not the same Batman that you knew. Yeah. Like the reveal of the different skin color. And all of a sudden, the whole tone changed. Because he's like, dude, why are you assuming I'm not going to kill you? And I'm
not him. Yeah, right. I love that.
Right, so it's a really interesting piece, and at the end, he stamps his foot down and goes, I am Batman. It's going to be interesting to see when he and Bruce meet. Is Bruce going to sanction him, and what is that going to look like? This reminds me a lot of, and I'm not saying it's the same thing, please don't take me wrong, but one of the things I really enjoyed about Nightfall was the idea that they were bringing Azrael back afterwards, and Bruce interacting with Azrael. And we get to see that recently in some issues of like Batman Urban Legends and stuff like that, where we got to see some Jean-Paul Valley stories. I love that character. That dynamic is so much more compelling because Bruce knows where he went to and what that looked like. How is he going to feel about Jace and what that world's going to be like? I'm very, very curious to see after this the interactions between the two. I find Jace's character compelling. I just don't want to see Bruce gone. I think that there is an interesting dynamic to be had there. I'm finding myself torn if I want Jace to continue being Batman long term, and I don't really care so much because I'm enjoying his book. I enjoyed like the series that led up to what we're seeing now, the future state stuff, the behind, that Digital First series that was coming out was really terrific. Second Son, and this new series is really great. So I love the character. I want to keep following him. I'm all in. I don't necessarily want a world where we don't. I don't want a world where we don't have Bruce Wayne. I'm okay with him being on the shelf for a while if that's where they're going to go. Except that's been done. Like, here's the thing: you can sell me on the story if you're doing it in a new and unique way, and we'll see that. But it's been done before. It's to me the far more compelling story is out of this. What happens if they're both operating? And Jace is like, you can tell me whatever you want. I'm not giving up being Batman.
Yeah.
And what does that world look like? I think that's an interesting story. Because I don't see it mattering what to Jace, what Bruce says. If Bruce tells him to like give up the cowl, you're kind of like, I'm Batman, dude. Okay. Show me your
100%. 100% think.
You gonna sue me?
Yeah, I'll 100% think that if Bruce tells him stand down, he won't. And he won't care that Bruce doesn't sanction him or authorize him. And that, for me, will be the interesting impact between them. What happens will we have a battle of the bats? Will we have a fight for the cowl? I don't know. And, on one hand, part of me would like to see Jace get his own title and his own name and his own code name and have his own identity. But he has his identity. He's Batman. And it's one of those things that in these couple issues and in the Second Son series, I really do like him as Batman. And it's hard for me to say I don't want Bruce Wayne because Bruce is an awesome Batman. He's a great character. And I understand what you're saying about we've seen it put on the shelf and don't know if we want that. It's one of I keep going back and forth on this. And I hate to say part of me wants to see them kill off Bruce, so he's not. It's not one of those temporary on the shelf things. But I don't want them to kill off Bruce, just like I don't want them to kill off Clark. But it's I don't know, man. I keep going through different emotional spikes and spectrums with this guy because again, I really like this version of the Bat. It's not as device focus. He's not the great detective. He is a very more physical kind of Batman. And even like in the previous issue, his partner's like got grappling hooks. He's like, I don't know do I look like I know how to use a grappling hook? Come on, he doesn't swing from rooftop to rooftop. He rides a cool bike. That's this Batman. That's his style. He still uses the shadows. He still uses fear, and he uses fear in a different way. But he's more of the physical ground and pound kind of Batman. And again, Bruce Wayne, the great detective, is an awesome Batman. I'm never going to knock that. But there is something different about this guy, and I kind of like that. I want to see him still operational. And like you, I do want to see what happens when he and Bruce interact. Because on one hand, I can see Bruce telling him, hey, drop it. On the other hand, I can see Bruce saying, we've got the code. Don't break the code. I don't break you. Because we've seen Bruce tell people, as long as you don't kill, we don't have a problem. But will he do that with the guy with a bat on his chest? There's a big difference between him calling himself Gotham Dude or calling himself Batman.
There's a big difference, too, between his son, being Dick Grayson, being Batman while he's still in operation, and somebody who especially if he knows who Jace is and knows his background, him being as comfortable with giving him the keys to the kingdom. It's going to be incredibly interesting. Here's the thing. I'm in for the ride. So whatever direction they go, I'm in. Here's what I don't think's coming out of this. I don't see Bruce dying. I don't see Clark dying. I think the stories they're going to tell are far more interesting. They're going to tell us what's going on with them. And I want to continue following Bruce. I want Jace as well. And everything you were saying about Jace and what makes him cool, I couldn't agree more with. I think he's just a great character. It's interesting to see how this is all going to play out. But I think we're going to get with Jace very similar to kind of what we're getting in the Superman books right now. I don't think Clark's dying in the Superman books. I think Clark's going on to a much more epic Odyssey story. Did you get a chance to watch the panel from New York Comic Con with Philip Kennedy Johnson?
No, I haven't had a chance to yet.
So he talks about his Warworld saga that's coming out. And I don't think the end of the Warworld saga is going to be the death of Superman. Although, who knows where it could ultimately wind up going. But he talks about his love for Clark and Clark as a symbol, not just to our world, but to the universe at large. So it's going to be very interesting to see, storytelling-wise, where he goes with the character. And I think it's the same thing with what's going on with Bruce right now. Where does Bruce go from here when this is all over? It depends on what happens with Gotham and what this world looks like. Boy, Seer is creepy. I'm looking at that I'm Your Daddy page. And this ability of Seer to use the virtual, in which we see this nowadays. There's a lot of technology now that allows people to, we see it in films, right? I mean, how many great Star Wars appearances have there been from people who are either no longer with us or for people who they de-aged, like Luke Skywalker, for example, in The Mandalorian. The technology's there to be able to do this now, to be able to put actors in films and do things with them. I mean, and it's not exclusive to Star Wars stuff. I mean, we've seen this done elsewhere where it's done really well. So this is like a really creepy use of that technology. And it's going to be something that's very, very interesting to see where that particular story goes. You know, another book I want to talk about before we wrap up this sequence, and honestly, if there's any other books you want to discuss, but Nightwing 85, did you read that?
Oh, God, yes.
What a cool story that is. So, spinning out of this saga is the Nightwing spinoff, and they're affected by fear gas, and there's this really cool battle, and I mean, I'm not going to go through every page of this one. I'm loving this Tom Taylor run on this book. The idea of Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon working together and how he was pulled to Gotham because he was trying to keep Barbara, Barbara called him, right? So he's trying to, deliver for Barbara and keep Barbara safe and be, part of that team because Barbara's always been there for him. Well, her sense of responsibility of here's this person that she loves that now has come there and she thinks he's dead. The fear gas makes her think that Nightwing is dead. Nightwing thinks she's dead. And you see this moment where it happens and she sees him shot in the head again, which happens in front of her. Their reaction after the fear gas was gone was like what we wanted since Tom Taylor's taken over because he's been hinting at a relationship between the two. Boy, yeah. I want to see where this goes, with Barbara and Dick. And talk about, like you, I love progression. There have been relationships with Dick Grayson, Starfire being one of them, that I've wanted to see go through and continue on. Nothing more than Barbara Gordon. I would love to see this relationship continue down the path. I don't know where it's going to go, but this is a ride I am ready to go on. And boy, did this story deliver a reason for these two to finally make it there. And I love that Red Robin was there, kind of basically say it's about time.
Oh, finally, yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, this issue was one of those things I absolutely loved it because, again, there is the whole moral question on what Oracle does. Oracle breaks into every single camera, phone, whatnot, in all of Gotham and has full access to everything. And she justified it because she's in charge of it, and she knows she's not going to exploit it or, use it for evil. Well, we're seeing Seer has taken over the Oracle network. Seer is completely using everything she laid out, knows everything that Oracle knows. So Seer knows the complete back history, the complete full-on family. She knows all of Oracle's secrets. And that's the thing for me out of this issue. One, I do I want to see where Dick and Barbara go because again, I'm with Tim on that. Oh, finally, thank you, because I wanted to see these two together. But I want to know what happens next for Oracle because this is showing her really big time. Yes, what she was doing, why she was doing it, understood it, and never thought of her as evil. But that wasn't the best of things, we've seen how a villain could use this to their advantage and really hurt the world with what she's laid out. This Oracle network that she laid out was something huge. And it even add on to it the fact that, they know where she is, they know where she's hiding, and they're going to go after her. But, if you think back to Future State, where Barbara was captured, and she was locked into that compute machine kind of thing, and that's where Barbara was, held throughout all of Future State. So this could be potentially leading to that, or this, again, could be one of those possible deviations off of Future State, and Barbara avoids being captured, because this time it's Nightwing, Robin, and Batgirl going after that. And then plus you add to it the whole thing that's going on with the Batgirls at the final page, which, again, I think they're going to be fine, but it's a really cool way to do this story, because this is a Nightwing story, but it's all about Oracle. It's all about the Batgirls and their connection with Nightwing. I thought that, for me, was a really great story and a really neat thing they're doing with giving Barbara, some really good screen time in the Nightwing title, because she is so connected to him.
Here's the funny part, my mind went here during this story as well. First of all, with Oracle, you've got the fact that now Oracle's network has compromised everybody, right? It's kind of similar to what Batman went through with his files, right, that he kept on everyone. When those were taken, they became weaponized and by the wrong people. Well, now Oracle's files have been, and you can make a strong argument that Oracle's done so much good with being so interconnected, but now it's got to come up with a new way to operate because of this. Here's the thing: with these three pieces converging, what's happening with Seer, what was happening with Simon, with what's happening with the Scarecrow, there's a potential for this all of these events to happen, and Saint to come out of this looking like a hero.
Oh, big time!
And
he 100% could come across as a hero, and maybe that's what happened for Future State.
Yeah. Well, a newer version of Future State, because now there's certain events in Future State that can't happen because of how this is played out.
Right.
And that's, at least it seems like that, and I could be wrong, but we'll see where this winds up going. I love this sense, this real intense sense of danger that's in this particular story. It's big. It's a big story and really, really good. Anything that we haven't had a chance to talk about, as far as we catch up on Future State?
Well, just one quick thing.
Sure.
The Catwoman stuff has been absolutely wonderful. I'll tell you, again, seeing just, how they let Selena she's having her own groove and her own style and her own part of the city, as I said before, where it's really coming alive. But you have that. It's neat having the Ivy connection between those titles, because I like that. I call that the conscience of Ivy, the humanity of Ivy. And if we can get the humanity mixed with the Queen Ivy, maybe we can have the Ivy that we know and love back. And maybe that's the plan. But even, it's neat seeing how Catwoman deals with deals with the villains. And again, I'm using air quotes around villains because they're fighting on the right side for right now. Who knows what's going to happen once Fear State is done? But I love seeing her put together the team. We got one last con that we got to run on these guys, if we're going to win this. Or even not even, and it's funny because she's saying not even win it. It's just they got to get Ivy out of town. They got to keep Ivy safe. They keep Ivy safe, they got a winning chance. And even, Selena's like, hey, if I need to, I'm the sacrificial lamb. I'm the one they want more than any of you. I'll draw fire, you get her to safety. And it was a neat concept. Again, you see Catwoman as a hero in this, but it's her own style of hero. And that's something that the title has done a really great job with, this whole after the wedding, after they get back together, after the city of Bane, all the different all the stuff that's going on with Bruce, how he needs to get focused. Selena's got to get focused too. Selena's got her own world she's got to deal with, and she's dealing with it in her own manner. And again, that's a title that can easily get overlooked in this, but it has some serious ramifications, but also beautiful storytelling going on.
Penguin and the Riddler are really interesting in this because they still hold a grudge with Selina. And we know that. There's a monetary grudge that's involved with them. But yet, there's an opportunity to take advantage of this situation, too. There's some wild cards there.
Well, I think what it is they're going to wait. They're going to pick their shot.
Sure.
Right now, they got to work with Selina. But the second they can double-cross her, they want that money back. I don't think they need to kill her. It's more about because you said there was a monetary revenge there. If they can, take advantage of that and play the long con and get their money back, because what was Bruce Wayne's wealth was in their hands briefly. Now they want it back.
Well, the other piece you have to remember, too, is they are taking an asset that's pretty important to Selina right now.
Yeah.
And they're involved in that. So is Ivy, or this portion of Ivy, going to get where she's intended? It's going to be an interesting sort of scenario. I also like this villain, the White Witch.
Yeah.
And the idea that this there's other versions of this creation that can be activated. And I liked seeing that at the end. It added like another creep factor because they had enough trouble taking out one, much less now taking out, versions 4 and 12 were being activated.
Yep.
So you're seeing, these protocols going into place, and boy, does that lead to another intensity for next issue.
Yeah, big time. Big time. Because especially, as you said, how many of them did it take to take down one? Well, now we got two of them. And it's, I really want it. This is one of those titles that I really enjoy reading and when it comes out, but it's not even just, it's the long con. Who is playing the final con? What are Enigma and Penguin planning? What is Ivy planning on the back end? Where is this going to play out? I don't know. I love this.
A couple things that people might be missing that are coming out this month that is pretty cool. We're going to be getting a DC versus Vampires 12-issue series that's coming out. We're going to be getting a Batman Long Halloween special done by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, which is going to be outstanding. I don't know if you had a chance to read it yet. Batman the Imposter is out now, the Black Label book, and it's really cool. So if anybody, we can talk further about it another time, but it's a really super cool book. So just a couple things I wanted to shout out that might not be on people's radar that came out that are just really, really interesting. There's so many great things out right now. But boy, this series has been great. And the idea now I'm kind of like shifting to, I'm caught up on this. There's other things I'm going to jump to read now that I'm excited to jump into. This is a great time to be a comic fan. We talk about all of our worries and concerns, and they're all valid. I'm not invalidating them. But I think it's important to sometimes take a deep breath and go, we are getting a lot of great content right now.
We are Crystal Men from Mercury. We have no quarrel with you.
How you doing, Sean and Jim? This is Rasul. Want to call you and talk about the great things we saw at Fandom. First off, I saw them releasing Blood Syndicate. You guys got that team on the app. You need to go read it and see what all the hype is about, why everybody wanted this book back. This is a book like any other thing that you ever want to read. Trust me. Next thing up, we got the great movie. Shazam looks amazing. Aquaman look amazing. All the surprises we had on the HBO Max app this week. The Young Justice cartoon was amazing. If you're a fan of the Martian Manhunter, you need to watch this cartoon immediately. If you're a fan of the League of Superheroes, you need to watch the new Young Justice cartoon immediately. DC is knocking it out the park. Next thing up, I want to give a testimony to Superman. I hear all this about how Superman is boring because he's not Deadpool or Wolverine where he wants to go in and kill first, ask questions later, let God sort him out. Stupid comments like this. Superman, first of all, is the greatest superhero of them all. He was the first superhero after the Hulk superheroes like the Spider, Doc Savage, the Black Bat, and he's been holding it down since 1938, over 1,000 issues. We'll go probably to 2,000 if DC Comics don't ever stop publishing books. He is the greatest. what kind of superhero you wouldn't want helping your grandmother crossing the street doing traffic, or pulling a cat out of a tree, or getting somebody out of a fire? I don't understand what the sentiment about Superman being boring. He is the greatest of them all, and everybody comes out to him. He's my first and last read every month when he comes out. Next topic I want to talk about is the video game Suicide Squad versus the Justice League. Now, this is the game I'm going to play. Like DC Universe Online, which I think is the greatest superhero game of all time. Matter of fact, I think it's the greatest game of all time because it's the most hours I've ever spent on a game. That game I used to play when I was laid off about 12 hours every day. So I love that game. But the new Suicide Squad versus the Justice League looks very good. I'm going to play this. I'm going to pre-order it on one of my systems, Xbox Series X or PS5, something. Might get it on both systems. Who knows? Next item up, the great cartoons that's coming from the studio, from the Milestone. My jaw dropped when I heard they was coming out with cartoons and a movie by Michael B. Jordan. This Static Shock movie is probably going to change the paradigm for DC Comics because it's going to bring in stuff no one else has done, and they probably beat everybody else to the punch. But let's hope the Static movie is very good. Get people that usually don't watch movies to the theater, and I will definitely be watching this movie in the theater. This will be one I will not watch at home. Of course, I will watch it at home once it comes home, but I'm going to the theater to watch this movie. Can't wait for the cartoons from Milestone. DC promised us this. They fulfilled it. Milestone is what I needed back. My life is complete. I love Milestone Comics. Like I said, I have all of them. I've read everything that they ever produced. They are on the app now. Everyone should be going out reading these books. Next subject I want to talk about, I really like the way DC is rolling stuff out on this app. I go on the app, I see a comic book called The Monkey Prince on there. I love the surprises like that, just spontaneous. People, even if you were upset at DC, go back and read your old stuff so you don't have to shuffle through all the long boxes. I know people was upset. They didn't hear a lot of Green Lantern news. But listen, DC has over 4,500 characters. There was no Firestorm news. I want a Firestorm book. I mean, there hasn't been one in years. But I haven't got one. I'm not going to turn my back on the company because I don't have a Firestorm book. I'm sure eventually he'll come back. He was on television, so I'm sure he's in somebody's mind. They just probably don't have the right person to do it. I also like the way DC is rolling out these miniseries. Everything doesn't have to be an ongoing. Do it in a succession of miniseries, and when guys go to the store, and you'll see those books on the shelf, and you might just pick that stuff up. So if you don't want to give a book a long series, just do a miniseries, or do like they're doing in the Batman Urban Legends book. Let guys get spotlights like the spoiler. That's the best way to do comic books. I don't know why comic book companies have fallen away from that format. And I would like to speak on some third-party companies out there, like Volt. Volt got a comic out called The Blue Flame. Everyone needs to be reading this book called The Blue Flame. It's about a superhero who was a survivor of his whole team getting murdered, and he's kind of like a paraplegic and an alcoholic trying to recover. Please read this book from Volt Comics called The Blue Flame. This is by a guy named Cantrell. I can't remember his first name off at the minute, but he also does books for Marvel and DC, I think, in the past. But just pick that book up. You guys have a pleasant day. Fandom was amazing. We got great stuff coming from DC. I'm excited. I'm excited for comic books in general. You guys keep on raising and keep putting out these great podcasts because you guys knocked it out of the park with your enthusiasm and your happiness.
I love when people get shot out of a cannon. I mean, and I say that I get like this, you get like this. We all do, and we get excited for this stuff. And it's interesting when he's talking about. I want to start with Milestone. I did not have the opportunity when Milestone was out to read everything, and I love when I hear people who have and their enthusiasm for it because I'm loving the new books. I've read since some of the older Milestone, and I'm gradually making my way through it. But I love the announcement of that omnibus that they're releasing with the old material, just because it got me on the current stuff, with the season 1. I'm so excited for season 2 and glad that they're doing like a Blood Syndicate series and all that. I'm really, really excited for that. But I'm incredibly interested from what his enthusiasm there in reading the older stuff, like that's rising up because I'm enjoying the new stuff so much. But when you hear from somebody who's read it all and they're like, my life is complete, this stuff is back. We all get like that, right? When there's been something that they haven't released in a long time and they bring it back and they nail it. And, hearing him all excited about the fact that there's going to be a Static Shock movie and all, I think that's great. I'm so glad he called in for that. Are you interested in the older Milestone material, like that omnibus? Is that something that is on your radar, is something you're going to want?
Yes, 100%. Again, and it's this whole, reintroduction of Milestone. Again, the panels have got me really excited for all of this stuff. That's something both the Fandom 1 and 2 did really well. Was it gave them a good spotlight and got people like me who've never read or thought about them, going, I got to read this. I need to see this now. What's going on here? Give me more, please. So it's, I'm 100%, with him on that. And I'm reading. I want to read the old stuff. I want to read the new stuff. I'm looking forward to movies, TV shows, and whatnot. I'm 100% in on Milestone now, and it's funny because when they announced the Blood Syndicate was coming, I was like, oh, cool. I had no idea who Blood Syndicate was, but I was like, they're telling me I'm in because everything they've said that have hit the ballpark, that have hit it out there for me, up to this point. They're 100% shooting completely straightforward. Yes, they're saying I'm going to love it. I'm loving it. So same deal. Now I've got another person singing the praise of Blood Syndicate. I'm like, all right, I'm going to hit the app and see what we can read and get some backstory on it.
So it was funny when he was talking about Green Lantern, lack of Green Lantern news and lack of Firestorm news. I was going to say, I wanted the Hawkman news and all that kind of thing. And I'm like, I actually got some good Hawkman news. Yeah. Like, he's going to be in the Black Adam movie. We're seeing him in comics. He's been in animation recently. And, so I'm like, I guess I'm going to complain about when it comes to Hawkman. I'm doing batting pretty high in Hawkman. He's in their Black Adam's going to be in that Hawkman movie that's coming out, so I'm excited for that. It'll be great. The movie Rock is going to play. I don't know if you saw that. He's going to play Black Adam in the Hawkman movie.
Yeah, I kind of saw that.
Yeah. But he was talking about the video games, and one piece I never asked you before. You've got a PS4, and DCU Online's free to play. Is that something that you would dive into or try? With it being free to play on your PS4. I know you and I approach gaming differently, and this isn't setting you up in any way. I was kind of curious about that. With that being a free to play game, would that be something you would be enticed into? I know you like MMOs.
Well, one of the things that when DC first came out, when the DC Online first came out, I was like, yeah. Then I started thinking, like, not everything in my life needs to be DC, so I was kind of avoiding it just because I needed something that wasn't DC.
Sure.
Well, then as I started looking at it, maybe I should give it a try. And I started going back and forth on it, so I started doing my research, which is the gameplay and all that. And I'll be honest with you, I was nervous about the controllers and how you access the power, because you got to do multiple flips and stuff like that on the controller. It wasn't, a keyboard setup, which is how I do. It's how I was very successful on City Heroes, was because it was the keyboard setup. It was mouse click for movement, keyboard for powers, and I could do that easily. But when I had to use when I got to use the two joysticks and then the different button combos for different move stuff, that really throws me off. And I kind of, it's one of those things, I'm intimidated by it, and I don't jump into it.
Here's what I'm going to ease this up for you. I don't know if you're thinking that this is like combo button based. It could not be simpler, the setup that's there. The controller is not like this multi thing. If you got to push the right stick and then push button 0 and do all that to do these moves, it's not what you're thinking. So it's actually a very basic controller layout, believe it or not. I urge you to give it a shot because it's actually the controller layout is very user friendly. I would love to see if you feel that way. So if you get a chance, try it out. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised with how, and don't take this, I don't mean this in an insulting way. I think it's accessible, not simple. And what I mean is, when you say simple, a lot of times it downplays, I think, the fact that there's a strategy to the game, which is what's great about MMOs, right? But the control scheme could not be more PC user friendly, because I prefer MMOs typically on a keyboard and mouse myself. And this one, it was interesting how they did the controller in such a way where they aren't mapping like 87 billion it was built from the ground up to be working off of a controller versus taking a keyboard based MMO and making it on a controller, if I'm making any sense.
Yeah.
So it's not this cumbersome, because I've played MMOs before where it was one that was meant to be done through a keyboard and mouse and they put it on a controller. This was built from the ground up to be on a PlayStation controller. It's appeared on other platforms since, but it really was meant to be played on a controller. Because of that, it takes advantage of a controller without it feeling like, geez, this should be on a keyboard instead, if it makes any sense.
Okay,
so
cool.
It's a lot more user-friendly, and I could see how reading an article about it might make you go, oh, this is really complicated. It's actually surprisingly not. Okay. And they walk you through very early on, like in the early missions or those introductory ones that kind of train you. And it's all story-based. It's pretty cool. The idea of creating your own character in the DC universe is pretty darn slick.
Yeah.
And if you've wanted to visit Gotham without any of the after effects, this is the way to do it.
Well, yeah, you know me. I want to hit for me, I'd want to hit the Metropolis and fly to the top of the Daily Planet.
There's a lot to this game that's really cool. So I think, and the idea of being able to choose your power sets and things like that is a lot of fun. So I think you should give it. I'd actually love, though, if I'm off base on that, to know that too. So it's not a setup. I think if you get a chance to play it, it'd be interesting. Superman boring. And it's funny, he's right. I mean, that's something that creeps up from time to time from people. And I don't know I think there are people that aren't reading Superman. Because I don't know how you could read the current Superman story and go, Superman's boring. So I think there are people who are justifying not reading Superman versus people that are Superman readers that typically do that. I love Wolverine just like the next guy. I'm a big Wolverine fan, so he mentions characters like Wolverine, and, there's been times where I've jumped in and out of characters like the Punisher and stuff like that and really enjoyed. It's really been monetary or time-based, the reason why I haven't read all of the Punisher, but I've read a number of runs. I think what I love about Superman is he's not those characters, and there's something different to him. And there's a unique experience when you read a Superman book that you can't really replicate with any other hero. There is not another hero in comics that's like Superman. And that's what's great about him.
And that's actually one of the neat things about when you get a really good writer who knows how to write Clark, how to write Lois, how to write Superman. That's the key to it. And we got to throw out John now, because John's big time part of this. Mm-hmm. It's not just writing a cool Superman story. Superman flies in, punches the big giant robot, and the day is done. It's all the little side stories about Clark Kent, Lois, John, about Jimmy Olsen, about, you pick a person from Gotham. They've got, Metropolis. Mm-hmm. You've got a huge supporting cast in there. And it's all about the interaction and the people's perception and just how he does what he does when he does it. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can tell in a great Superman story. And I think part of it is, sometimes people just, will look and just see the big blue Boy Scout, the big superpower. And, okay, only way we can have an interesting Superman story is if we depower him. No, he can still have his powers, and you can still make a great story with it. You just got to tell a story. It's not a superhero story. It's about a guy who happens to be a superhero. Some of those are some of the best stories. It's like some of my favorite Wonder Woman stories aren't about her where it doesn't end with her punching the bad guy. It's her dealing with, using compassion, love, and all the wonderfulness that is Wonder Woman to solve the problem. And same thing on the Bat side. Some of the great Bat stories aren't just him coming in and I'm Batman and beating everybody up. There is the detective side to it. So each of these characters have these great little nuances that you've got to bring out to tell a great story. You can tell a cool story with Superman where there's nothing deep about it. He's still Superman. You still can have some fun with it. But when you get the difference between a good story and a great story, an epic story, those are the ones where you dive into the nuances of who Clark is, who Lois is, their relationship, their connection to people, their connection to the world, their connection to the universe. There's so many different stuff you can do with him.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with him more on the Young Justice love. What a great cartoon that is. And I highly recommend for anybody out there, if you've never watched Young Justice, go back to the beginning. It's one of those that the story, you can jump, I will say this, you can jump on the current season and have no issues. But the nice part is if you have HBO Max, you can just start at the beginning and watch it all the way through. There's a continuing story that's there that is well worth watching. So, there's not a wrong way to watch Young Justice. It's okay to start on the new season, and you'll figure it out quickly because of the fact that, it's good storytelling. But I don't know if you agree with me, but my feeling is if I were to recommend anybody how to tackle that cartoon, it would be go back to the beginning because you're in for a great ride. I think it's a nice ongoing story in its own little universe that is very, very, very reminiscent of the comics.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. Again, it's one of those things where you can very easily pick it up and go, but it is a much funner ride if you start from the beginning because they do really cool with progression of characters. I think that's something that I really enjoy about all of those animated series. Really did a great job of progression of characters, but Young Justice really does a great job with that.
Agreed.
And just on a side note, I am right now looking at the Blue Flame, and I am going to be picking up just solely on your recommendation. So thank you. I'm always looking for new stuff to read.
And please feel free to use our podcast for that, because I echo Jim's comments. I'm obviously wanted to pick that up as well. A lot of times, one of the strengths nowadays, we talk about all the negatives of social media and all that. This is the positive of it. The fact that now we can get together and through podcasts and through Facebook groups and through email, exchange this stuff with each other. I find out about more great comics this way. So if there's something you're loving out there, it doesn't have to just be DC. Feel free to call in and give us your comments and shout things out. I like our podcast being a source of that. The idea is for all of us to be able to know other opportunities out there for great comic book reading.
Green Lantern, let you and I destroy that space junk.
I would like to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We love having you part of our show. RagingBullets@gmail.com is our email address if you prefer to contact us that way. We have RagingBullets.com, which is our show website. It feeds Twitter. It feeds a Facebook fan page. We are proud to be part of an amazing Facebook group community. And one of the things I love about the Facebook group community is, I've mentioned it before, this is a great spot to find out news, releases that are coming out, commentary about current comics and all of pop culture. It's a great way to shout out websites, blogs, comics that you're enjoying. It's a safe, fun community, and I really appreciate everybody there because that is the first spot I go to for my news. The About Us section of our show websites, we're going to find out how to get to us on social media, but also gaming platforms. We love connecting with you. Sponsoring this episode, as always, is DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Jim, what's going on over at DCBService.com?
We have Static Season 1 hardcover, 50% off, only $14.99. And we have the Represent hardcover, 50% off, only $12.49. Thank you, DCBS.
Remember, at InStockTrades.com, you can also pick up the Batman Last Night on Earth trade paperback. This is $24.99 regularly, 42% off, only $14.49. Thank you, DCB Service and InStockTrades.com, for continuing to support our show. Jim, our next episode, we're going to do an Injustice watch-along. This has recently been released, and I'm really excited to talk about this with you, in particular because of the fact that we've shared on the show the fact that we're different kinds of gamers. And while you are a gamer, you don't play a lot of the games that I do. One of them, you haven't played Injustice. So your exposure to Injustice is a lot more through the comic books. And in particular, it's going to be this animated film. So I'd love to have a chance to talk to you about your experience with this story. Did you like it? And what do you think about the whole world of Injustice? So we will see everyone next week.
Bye!
All right, you guys. Are you ready to sing your song?
I'd say we are. Yeah, let's sing it now.
Okay, this should be fun. Now get ready for your cue. Okay, Sean?
Okay.
Okay, Jim? Jim? Jim!
Okay. Raging bullets time is here. We talk about what we hold dear. Comic books and TV shows. Superheroes and their clothes. Justice League and so much more. I just love Green Lantern Corps. We talk about the books we've read with spoilers straight ahead.
Okay, fellas, get ready. That was very good, Sean.
Naturally.
Jim, you're a little flat there, so be careful. Jim? Jim? Jim!
Okay. Justice League and so much more. I still love Green Lantern Corps. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show.
Excellent job, guys.
Let's sing it again. Yeah, let's sing it again.
No, that's enough. Let's not push it.
Push it. What is that? Yeah, what are you talking about?
No, I didn't mean anything by that.
I think
Sean,
it's right there.
Jim,
Like, it's on the, I don't know.
how long do you want the song to go?
Look, it's not